Okay. Today we're going to start on Hayamid Beis, and it starts right by the Siman Hagash Basar. Didn't even look at what that Siman is referring to, but it's Yosef Rav Huna Rav Nachman. What is that? Like 10 lines, 12 lines from the top. Okay, we thank Hashem. We learn Torah every day. Yes, we're learning. We should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. So learning for Shlema, and also my father and Naftali ben Yehuda. Okay, we had a conversation before. What happened? Got volume 2. We had a conversation before between Rish Lakish and Rebbe Lozer. So Amiroim in Eretz Yisrael. Conversation went like this. Rish Lakish says, if the sacrifices that are not brought lishma are valid, so why do you have to bring another one? And if they're not valid, so why do you continue bringing this one? We had like this miman of shach type of question. What are we doing over here? You say that it's kshera, but it's not maratza. It's kosher, but it doesn't appease. So what's going on? Is it yes or is it not? So Rebbe Lazar told him back that we find that a woman that gives birth, and she passes away, that the oila is still offered, not the chatas, but the oila is still offered. So you see, even though it's not an appeasement, you see that the sacrifice is still brought. Now, Yosef, let's start the Gemara today. Yosef, Rav Huna, Rav Nachman. Rav Huna and Rav Nachman are sitting. These are students of Rav or Shmuel, and Yosef Rav Sheshes Kabaya. Rav Sheshes is sitting with them. I think Rav Sheshes is a little younger. Yasi v'Kamri, and they were sitting and they were saying, "Kashlei de Rish Lakish Asham, L'Yasi Lacham Yisa." Rish Lakish was bothered by an Asham. It says an Asham is not brought after the woman passes away, right? Or after the owner passes away. And Leimalei Rebbe Lazar Asham Nami Asi Lacham Yisa. Why doesn't Rebbe Lazar? So in that conversation, we only had that the oila could be brought, but in Asham we said cannot. Rav Sheshes responded back. He says, "You're telling me about an oila that I understand, but an Asham is not brought lacham misa." So now the Gemara is saying, and so Rish Lakish was concerned. How could you bring a sacrifice that's not an appeasement? How could you bring an Asham sacrifice that's not an appeasement? In that conversation, Rabbi Lazar told him back, well, Rabbi Eliezer holds that an Asham isn't brought, so you're right. And Rish Lakish told him, I'm not talking about Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, I'm talking about the sage's opinion that says that it is brought. Why is an Asham brought? So now the Gemara is asking, well, 1 second. We actually have a case where an Asham is brought lacham misa after the owner passed away, which means that even though it's not an appeasement. Now that case would be where the owner dies. What do you do with the Asham? You let it graze until it gets a mum, and then you sell it, and you bring a sacrifice with that money. That sacrifice goes to Ketzim Mizbeach, goes to keep the altar occupied, so busy when it's quiet times in the temple. So you see that a sacrifice could be brought, even though the owner passed away, which we see by the guilt offering. So Amalu Rav Sheshes says back to them, this is Rav Huna and Rav Nachman that we're talking, says, Asham l'may karav. What do you mean you bring the Asham? You don't bring the actual Asham. You bring l'maysrei. You bring the remnants of the Asham. What's the remnants? After it got a mum, you sold it, and that money you brought a new carbon, and that you brought. So it says, if that's the case, if that's what you think is going to satisfy this problem of miman of shach, do you bring it? Do you not bring it? Well, you see that you do bring it by the Asham. If you think that's going to satisfy, then we know that there's a difference between carbon chatas and the rest of the sacrifices. Carbon chatas, we know, is not brought shalei l'shma, right? Here we're talking about our basis of this whole discussion is a carbon that's shalei l'shma. That's for the wrong. It's being brought for the wrong sacrifice. The carbon chatas is not brought shalei lishma. Says, but if you're going to prove to me that an asham could be brought shalei lishma, based on the fact that an asham could be brought lachar misa, and it's even though it's brought, even though it's not an appeasement, well, chatas nami mikra of karva maisra. By a chatas, there is a possibility of also bringing carbon chatas, even though the owner is not around, the owner passed away. Usually we say that by a carbon chatas that the owner passes away. Chatas shemisa bala is it's one of the 5 chatas, 5 sin offerings that are put to death. We had that Gemara before. There's 5 sin offerings that are put to death. One is if the owner was atoned for already. One is if. So here, what we're talking about is where the owner. We have a case though, where the owner designated 2 sacrifices. This is the way men go shopping. They don't know what their wife is going to want. Did she want this type of flour or that type of flour? So you have to buy both, or else you're going to go back to the store. So this fellow, he designated 2 sacrifices. Why 2 sacrifices? Not because he wasn't sure which one, like that my story with the husband in the store, but because just in case there's people that shop like this also, they buy an extra one just in case. So he designates 2 sacrifices just in case one gets lost, they should have the other one. So now what happened was, well, it didn't get lost. He brought one of them. Now what do you do with the other one when it's done? So it says like this. You let the second one graze. Instead, it doesn't get put to death. You just let it graze. What happens after it grazes? It gets a mum. And then you buy with that a new sacrifice, and you bring it to the on the mizbeach. So we say like this, you say, look, if you're proof that you can offer a sacrifice even though there's no appeasement, and the proof for that is a sacrifice that's brought after the death of the owner, you bring it even though there's no appeasement, well, then I would do that for a chatas also. And I know that a chatas is not brought if it's l'shalei lishma. So this messes up our whole equation. So the Gemara says like this. Chatas afagav the kreva maisra miyatrach manahu. Says chatas is different. Chatas, I have a clear pasuk that says by a chatas it says chatas hu, that a chatas needs to be slaughtered for the right intention, and if not, it's not valid. It says chatas hu, it is a chatas, and if any deviation from that invalidates it. So you can bring all the logics you want, but the chatas is going to have its own status. It says Hashem namiksiv behu. Okay, well you say, tell me that if it says who, which means it is, then that's going to change the law. Then by the Hashem it also says who. It says no. You're just comparing verses without looking at them. It says hahu, that one, or that hahu, that time it says who. Lachak tarsi maramud iksiv. That's talking about after the sacrifice was already brought. It says that it is an asham, but not by the shchita. You see, by the chatas, it says that's over there. You should check the chatas. Chatas who? It is a chatas. It's telling me that in the process of the offering, it has to be clear that the intention is for a chatas. By the asham, yes, it says that it is an asham. But that's after the entire sacrifice was brought. It says ahu lachar asham nami ksivu. It says ahu lachar tarsi muramud ksiv. That said after the limbs were already offered. That pasuk of ahu. Kidatanya, as it was taught in the Brisa, abal asham leinemar hu ela lachar tarsi muram buha atzma yom leiktir muram kasher. You have to look at it like this. It says, even if the limbs of the sacrifice were not brought, the animal is still a good sacrifice. Sacrifice is still kosher. What affects the validity of the sacrifice? The sprinkling of the blood, not the burning of the limbs. So when it says who, that has no effect on the validity of the sacrifice, because it said who after. It says okay, so then Elohu Lamali. So then why does it say it if it has no effect on the validity of the sacrifice? Look at the Rav Huna Marav. So Rav Huna says in the name of his teacher, Rav. Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Rav Huna says, name Rav, Asham, Shenitek L'Riya V'Shachtu Stam Kasher. An Asham that the guilt offering, that the owner had an atonement from a different sacrifice. So what did we do with this one? We let it graze until it gets a mum. Now, and then it was shechted. So was it shechted before it got a mum? Is that what it's saying? It was sent to graze, and it didn't get a mum, I guess. Someone slaughtered it. Yeah, that's what happened. So it says that it's kosher. You designated it to graze, but it didn't actually get the mum. It didn't like follow through. It didn't. The plan here was supposed to be that you designate it to graze. It gets a mum. You sell it for its value after it has a mum, and then you with that money you buy a oila, a burnt offering, and you put it on the altar. When the altar is empty, it should be full. But so the plan didn't play out. You said it, put it in the barn to graze, and someone took it and offers it as a sacrifice. So it says that it's kosher.
No mum.
No mum, but it was separated for grazing. The Gemara says nitik in. It's because you separated it to do the grazing. That's why it's going to be valid. But loy nitik. But if you didn't separate it loy, then it's not valid. Mm-hmm. Now we're using the pasuk of asham hu to say that when it's an asham, before you separate it, then it's going to be an asham. Then you can't bring it as an oila. But once it's separated and designated for grazing, then it loses its status. My time, what's the reason? That one, it's who it is, stays in its status until it's separated. Yeah, the question?
Is there any other kind of sacrifice other than the guilt offering that they allow the animal to stay alive?
So there's a lot of sacrifices that we have to do this for. If whatever reason we have an extra sacrifice, it can't be brought. So, actually, you know what? You may be right. The guilt offering would be the most common one, because it would be a sin offering.
Because guilt never really disappears. It just
but there's donation offerings where whatever you brought one donation offering and you happen to have another one, so you just bring it. You don't need to get a mum in it. To sell it, mum is a blemish, a defect, right. And then you say you don't have to do that. You would just offer another sacrifice, just bring it up. But here, because it's a guilt offering for a specific sin, you already had an atonement for that sin, so you let it graze till it gets a mum, and then you sell it, and with the value of it, which was consecrated, the value was consecrated. The value, you buy a new offering, not a guilt offering. You buy a burnt offering, an elevation offering, and you offer that up on the altar. That would be the most common one. Yeah.
What if it doesn't get a mum?
Just leave it till it does. You would put it in in a place where it could get scratched, it could get caught or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Yasvi Rav Nachman or Rav Sheshes? Last time we had Rav Huna and Rav Nachman were sitting, and Rav Sheshes was on the side discussing this asham business with the who and the not who, right? So now it's Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes are sitting. Yosef Rav Ada Bar Masna Gabayo, and Rav Ada Bar Masna is sitting there. Yosef Kamri and Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes are discussing. Rabbi Lezer says, Rabbi Lezer says to Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish said, if the sacrifice that was slaughtered for the wrong intention is still valid, so then why doesn't it appease? And if it doesn't appease, why is it still valid? Rabbi Lezer says, well, we find that there's a sacrifice that's brought after the death of the owner, which obviously can't be an appeasement for the owner. The owner's not alive anymore. And so we see that it's still brought. Okay, that was like the beginning of that conversation. So Let Rish Lakish tell him back. What are you talking about? You're telling me that it wasn't an appeasement? The sacrifice was brought, the woman gave birth, she brings an ayla. It wasn't appeasement. So that's not a good comparison to the sacrifice that's being brought for the wrong intention, which is not an appeasement. Because over there it is appeasement. I know she's not alive, but still an appeasement. Amalo Ravada Barmasta, you led us? What are you talking about? A woman that gave birth, I understand that the inheritors are going to bring the sacrifice, and they're bringing it because of the mother gave birth. So they're bringing it, and you're telling me that it's going to be an appeasement for the inheritors, but the inheritors didn't give birth. It's the mother that gave birth, and the mother's not alive. You can't tell me it's an appeasement. Okay. Maskefla Rav, I think it's Rav Ashi. It says Rav Asi, but the Shita goes to Rav Ashi. Now, Rav Ashi is a while later. Interesting. I don't know why he switches it then. Maskefla Rav Ashi. Oman leimalon the yika kama asay gaba le miskapra. Given the chiyika kama asay gaba mechapra yershanami mechapra. This question is like this. 1 second. Why is an ayla offering brought? Well, it could be as a donation, right? But in the Torah we have positive commands and negative commands. Someone violates a negative command, so many times he's going to have to bring a sin offering. You shouldn't eat blood, you shouldn't eat forbidden fat. He did, so he brings a chatas. What happens if he missed doing a mitzvah? He didn't shake the lulav, he didn't hear the shofar, he didn't put on tefillin, it was neglect of a positive command. It was a you shall do. So what do you do for that? So you bring a karbanayla, you bring an elevation offering. And that's an atonement for a mitzvah saseh, a positive command. Okay, so now what happens is this woman is bringing an ayla because she gave birth. Let's say she had positive commands that she neglected and she wants it to cover that as well. It says, yeah, one karban can cover many asayas that were neglected, positive commands that were neglected. It's not like a sin offering where you violated it once, you bring one sin offering on it. A second time, you bring another sin offering. That karban ayla could cover many. Wow. Alter Rebbe mentions this in the Geras HaTshuva. This about the tzedakah for a sin. You have to cover every sin individually, or is like an ayla that one sacrifice covers all of the mentions this. So he says, 1 second, let's say this woman had many asay. Wouldn't it be an atonement? And since it would atone for her many assays, so Yarshanami Mechaper, maybe it should atone for the orphans, the inheritors are bringing the mother's sacrifice that she passed away, and she needed to bring a sacrifice for her birth that she had. But let's say the orphans had positive commands that they neglected. So it would atone for those. I know she didn't give birth, the orphans didn't give birth, but it would cover those the neglected positive commands. So if that's the case, so you see that it's an appeasement, which takes us back to Rish Lakish could have told Rabbi Lazar, what are you telling me? That it's not an appeasement. It is an appeasement. It covers, it's like an atonement for these positive commands. The Gemara's challenges, it says, L'meimer dekanyalu. The only way that would work would be if the inheritors would acquire the sacrifice, which was already consecrated by the mother, and they're acquiring it and bringing it as their own, and does it really go over into their possession? You would have to say it goes over into their possession for it to be an atonement for them. But Rabbi Yochanan says, someone leaves over a karban mincha. Now, the rule is a karban mincha is a meal offering. It's only brought by an individual. It's not brought as partnership. So if someone leaves a karban mincha, he designates a karban mincha, and then he passes away, and he has 2 sons. Now the sons are inheritors. Now, but they're 2 sons means that they're partners. Partners is a problem for a karban mincha. So it says, Kreva vein by Shutras. They bring it and it's not considered partners. But if they would acquire it, Nefesh Rachmana. It says that only one individual, it says a soul that offers a mincha, not two. So you won't be able to do it. So what are you telling me that the sacrifice that the mother could have brought is now inherited by it goes to the inheritors and they could bring it, it's going to be an appeasement. Now the Gemara challenges like Kanyalahu, and it's not considered acquired by the inheritors from Rabbi Yechanan, but what Rabbi Yechanan says another statement. He says, let's say he left an animal over to two sons as a sacrifice and he died. Kreva, the animal is brought as a sacrifice, but they can't do Tamura. Tamura means that when you exchange one animal for another animal, it's a prohibition. You're not allowed to take a sacrifice and say, instead of this one, I'm going to bring that one. The rule is, though, that if you did that, they're both brought. But it's a violation. You're not allowed to do that. That's another Masechta. The whole Masechta. Masechta Tamura. After Zevachim, Menachos, Chulin, Cheres, Mila, you have Tamura. You have coming up in a year or so.
Is that because, like with whenever the higher sacrifices, you have to let the fat drain down, and then the other ones you don't? They're different as far as.
No, probably the reason I know, but probably the reason for this would have been that we don't know if you're going to be switching a good one for a bad one. We don't know your motivation. You say, "Oh, it's good," like the kids divide the cookies. Say, I'll take this and you take that one. There's a reason why. So, so it's even if you're claiming it's a good one for a bad one, it's still not allowed. That's what it seems to. Okay, so I'm sorry. Even a good one for a bad one, it says that. Right? Now, the problem is, if you say that the inheritors acquired the sacrifice from the father that just passed away. So then, that's why they can't make Tamura, because they become partners. Now, another rule of partners, the rule that we just mentioned was partners don't bring a carbon mincha. Now we have another rule of partners, that partners can't do Tamura. So if they're partners, and partners can't do Tamura, it's only on an individual sacrifice, not on a public. It can't be owned by more than one person in order for Tamura to, because the pasuk says Le'yachlifenu v'layamer Laisai. Homer Yamer is all said in singular. So that means that only one individual owning the sacrifice could do Tamura. Now, okay, so we said it must be that you're acquiring it.
Partnership.
Yeah, and that would explain why you can't do Tamura. But if we say Laikanilu, but if you say that they don't acquire it, so why can't they do Tamura? It's still owned by the father. It's still owned by one individual. Well, the Gemara says, Shani Hasim Damakram Hamar Yamar L'Rabbis Yerish Echad Meimer Veinstein Memirim. So we have a pasuk. This doesn't prove if you acquire it, if you don't acquire it. This could be really that they do acquire it. And could be really that they don't acquire it. And we still have a rule that if there's only one inheritor, can they do Tamura, not if there's two inheritors. Really, they don't acquire it. Okay, if they don't acquire it, where does that leave us? If they don't acquire it, that leaves us with the inheritors would not have the offering to bring, so there would be no appeasement, which would leave us with the question that we asked: why doesn't Rish Lakish say to Rabbi Lazar, what do you mean there's no appeasement by that woman that gave birth? Sure, there's appeasement. The inheritors, it covers a neglect of a positive command, and it's an appeasement there. So that would only work if they acquired it. But now we're saying that they possibly don't acquire it. Okay, that's what we're holding now. Which means we've answered the problem. Get it. The problem was why didn't Rish Lakish respond to Rebbe Lazar or something? And we said that, well, he couldn't have said that because they don't acquire. That's where it seems we're holding. Yeah, these Gemaras are complex because every time you switch, it has this ripple effect where then it goes back to, at the beginning, so where the question's holding. Maskefla Rabbi Yaakov min Har Pekoid. Rabbi Yaakov min Har Pekoid has the following question. We've had this Rabbi Yaakov before. Elamayata Gabi Meiser. When it comes to Meiser, Meiser is referring to now as Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni is the second tithe, which is supposed to be brought to Jerusalem, and you eat it in Jerusalem. Now, the truth is, you can also redeem it. You don't have to bring the fruit itself; it could be too heavy to carry all of those fruits or whatever it is, the grain, to Jerusalem. So what you do is you sell it, or you just redeem it. You sell it to yourself. You exchange it for money, and then you bring that to Jerusalem, the money. Now, if it's the owner that's doing the redemption, then he has to add a fifth. Very good. Very good. And if it's not the owner, then you don't have to add a fifth. So it goes like this. When it comes to Meiser, it says, if he will redeem it, the Rabbi says a Yerush. It's coming to include if the inheritor redeems it also. Now, the inheritor is taking the place of the father that owned this and passed away, and now the inheritor is redeeming it. So is the inheritor considered an outsider, or is he considered the owner? If he's considered an outsider, then he doesn't have to add the fifth. If he's considered the owner, and then he does. So it says, the Rabbi says here is coming to include the inheritor, that he is considered the owner, and he has to add the fifth. Hey, look at this. I had something that was consecrated, that gets passed down to the inheritor, and the inheritor is considered the owner. So, Hachinami. Echad goyel vein shnayim goyelen.
I think
Yeah,
that's
because the whole
question.
time it was talking about shutfis or two brothers or two children. Now
Right.
there's only one.
Right. So we would say that only one does the redemption, which means what? That if there's two children, they can't redeem it? It must be. No, question is like this. We said before, im hamer yamer. And we said, hamer yamer is a special gezerah, is a special understanding of the pasuk. When it comes to Tmura, that only one can do the Tmura and not two. So there was a limit from the pasuk that tells me. So the Gemara is taking those words, Im Hamer Yamer, and it's comparing to Im Gol Yigal. It has the same conjugation. Those words, that the double word with the first one, whatever it's called, Jaran, and the second one is the regular verb. It's the same way. We should say the same pshat in the pasuk, that only one can do the redemption and two cannot do the redemption. Im Hamer Yamer. And so in Gal Yigal should be the same thing. It says Shani Ma'aser the Gabavu and Nam Yisib B'Shutvis. He says no. When it came to Tmura, exchanging one animal for another animal, the father could only do this if he was the single owner, but not if there's a partnership. So when it comes to Meiser, so when it comes to the inheritor, before we get to the Meiser, comes to the inheritor, and the pasuk says if he will redeem it, that means only when an individual can redeem it, not a partnership. When it comes to Meiser, there was no such law that the father can be only a single owner and not a partnership. So therefore, when it comes to the inheritor, the same thing, it could be a partnership as well. Amalei Ravasi, so in other words, the maskif was just on the Hamer Yamer. Amalei Ravasi le Ravashi. We know, and from this, I Amrit Bishlei Makanya Lehu If you say that he acquires it, that would mean that one person can do then the tmura, but not two. But if you say that he doesn't acquire it, then how could he do tmura at all? We have to say that he is acquiring it. We're discussing now if something that's consecrated is bequeathed from the father to the child, and that they should acquire it. And the relevance of that is if it becomes the inheritor's property, the relevance of that is that it would be an appeasement for them when they bring that sacrifice for other sins, other neglect of positive sins that they themselves had, because they acquired the sacrifice. They now could be used, which could have been a response that Rish Lakish could have given to Rebbe Elazar. So if we're saying that now that he acquired it, then that question would come up. And we're saying that he does acquire it, because if he doesn't acquire it, how could he do Tmura? Amar Rabavo, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabavo says the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Rabavo is a student of Rabbi Yechanan. He says, Hamakdish Maisif Chaimesh. What happens is, if a person
But he started his own sheep. So.
Yeah. If someone takes a vow that he's going to bring a sacrifice, but he doesn't actually bring the designated, someone else says, "Oh, I'll take care of that," and separates the sacrifice for him. So now I have two owners here. And if it's going to be redeemed, if it gets a blemish and it's going to be redeemed, so the owner has to add a fifth to the redemption. Who's the owner? The owner, on one hand, is the person that's pledged. The other owner is the person that took the vow is the owner, or the owner is the one that pledged it. Yeah, it's on behalf. So who's the owner now? After this is over, he pledged on behalf of this person, but on the other hand, he is the one that consecrated it. Rabbi Yechanan says that in this case, the owner is the one that pledged it, not the one that took the vow. However, the one that took the vow, the one that needed the sacrifice, he's the one that's getting the atonement, when the sacrifice is for, he's the owner when it comes to Tmura. But let's say when it comes to Truma, not Tmura, but Truma. Truma is the grain that's given to the Kohen, right? 2% is given to the Kohen. So if someone takes Truma for someone else's grain, so to which Kohen does it go to? To the one that's the owner of the grain, or the one that's the owner of the Truma? Each one has their own Kohen son-in-law, let's say, that they want the grain to go to. So it goes to the one that separates he said, I separate, I get to give it to my Kohen. So the Gemara says what's happening now is that obviously the inheritor has to be the owner, because we say miskaper, I said tmura, and you're telling me that he can that the inheritor can make tmura if there's a single inheritor, not two. How does he make tmura if he's not the owner? It must be he acquires it. So the Gemara says that mikiva le mechapra. This is not a real atonement that's happening. He doesn't really acquire it. That's why when it comes to the Karban Mincha, the inheritors were able to bring it because they weren't really the owner. You're telling me that there's some sort of atonement, though. Mikufya mechapra. There's some sort of like incidental atonement that takes place, but it's not like the full atonement that's happening here.
Quick question. Did the father passed away? Right, gave Maser and their money. Now this inheritor gets it. See if they give Maser again, or is it money that is considered Maser?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure. That's a very good question. Dr. Stein is asking if a father took Meiser off money that he earned,
It's inheritance tax, yeah.
and then he leaves it to the inheritors. The inheritors have to take Meiser again.
Because I always have the question with, if you have what do you call it, a 401 or all these Roths and all these things, even though you may not pay taxes, you made the money, if you were from Jew, you gave the maser that year, and you put the rest in. But you can't touch that money until now you take it out.
Oh.
So do you just look at the interest that was accrued, which there's a required, I'm in this age now, required minimum you gotta pay.
So when
And then from that, you pay maser from the maser that you
I didn't realize that if you have like an account, like a Roth account where money gets put aside, taxes are taken out, but you're
No,
also
they're
taking.
not taking them out until you eventually take them out.
Oh, really? So
That's
you don't
called
pay.
the RMD, right?
Uh-huh.
But you might have taken maser out.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
the thing is, it might have accrued
Uh-huh.
interest. So when you get to take it out now,
Uh-huh. Maybe
obviously-
postpone the Meiser until
Well,
until you take it out, because that would be your real earning. That would make
or
sense.
if
Or
not,
else,
pay your
it gets
original
very
maser
confusing.
and then the maser from what you take
Oh, and
out,
then,
which is the minimum.
That gets
It's
confusing.
tricky.
Okay, I thought that meant that the taxes were taken before it was put aside. But that's what
That's
a Roth
one
account
of
is.
those type of accounts.
Yeah, the Roth, is one of them. 401k can be Roth or not, or regular, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Most of them sell you on pre-tax thing, but at the end, before you cash, they take the tax. Like pre-tax, they'll take money from the check, pre-tax, and everything is pre-tax. But then when you are gonna
Yeah,
cash
they
in,
catch you later.
yeah.
Get you later. Yeah.
The devil.
Okay, let me read the summary of this. So here, okay, so the Gemara answers that an inheritance sacrifice does not affect regular atonement for the heir. Nevertheless, it does affect peripheral atonement for him. Therefore, he has enough standing to affect Tamura with it. Let me see, 16. An heir does not require the regular full atonement of his father's sacrifice. Thus, he does not actually qualify as its owner. Consequently, if he inherits a mincha together with his brother, they do not invalidate it as partners. Nevertheless, the heir does receive a secondary measure of atonement from it. This suffices to qualify him to make tamura. In regard to a mincha, however, only true ownership, which comes from receiving full measure of atonement, is a factor. Okay, it tells me. Although an heir does receive the small peripheral atonement from his parent's sacrifice, Rabbi Elazar was nonetheless justified in responding to Rish above that the fact that the heir offers the oila of their deceased mother demonstrates that a sacrifice is offered even when it does not provide atonement, since the purpose of a sacrifice is to obtain its regular atonement. If there's no one to receive this atonement, then the sacrifice being offered not for the purpose of its atonement. Okay. Basically, Rabbi Elazar was correct in his answer, and Reish Lakish didn't have a question on him. What do you mean? But there is an atonement. So it's not a real atonement. That's very wrong. Bailahu, let's go a drop further. Bailahu, the Gemara has a question. Now, the Gemara says like this: Kipru al mashaboa le Kipru. In order to understand this question, we're sort of switching gears here. You have to take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, Kodshim shnizbechu shalei lashman yikravu. Tnan le'ol l'shem chayv, b'tzarech lav yacher. Mi'voilem kipra al chetcha v'shu alav, and afkamina shalei yidag min yisurim b'intayim. If there's a sacrifice that was slaughtered for the wrong intention, so it says you bring it, continue bringing it, right? The only question that we have is, you have to bring another one. You have to bring another one. Only question that we have is, but did the one that was brought, did it atone for the sin that it was being brought for? I know you have to bring another one, but was there an atonement? So what's the difference? You have to bring another one. The next one will be an atonement if you have to bring another. Rashi says that, what about having a sin lingering over the person's head in the interim until you bring the second one. Was there an atonement that took place from the first sacrifice? Was the wrong intention. Amar Reish Lakish Breder of Amar. I'm sorry. Amar Reish Rav Sheshes Breder of Idi. What's the Aleph? Rav Shisha Breder of Idi.
Is this tradition takes two animals and then make only one was sacrificed?
No, he brought a sacrifice, but the Kohen, let's say, he was bringing an Oila, right? Or an Asham, according to the sages, and the Kohen has the wrong intention. So you continue bringing the sacrifice, you finish it off. It's not invalid; it's still valid, but you have to bring another one because you said that you were going to bring an Oila. This one was brought as something else, a Shlamim. You had the intention. So the Gemara, the Yeshiva, has a question. Was there an atonement for what you brought it for? This is, well, you have to bring a second one. So let that, Rashi says, so the second one will be the atonement. Says, no, in the interim, are you covered by the first one so that the person shouldn't be suffering because of the sin that he has in his hands?
Maybe the person has to take animals and then one, then between the other two.
What do you mean he has to take 3 animals?
Maybe
He did 3 sins? Yeah, but so each sin gets one. If it's a sin offering, then each sin required 1 animal. So it would be an atonement only for that individual. If it's a positive command in an asham, that one oila can cover many, like we said in the last command. So here we're asking, is there an atonement that takes place from this invalid sacrifice? Well, the valid sacrifice, but you need another one. It probably doesn't atone. If it atoned, then why you bring a second one? Probably it's you have to finish it, but it doesn't mean it works. Elamai Kipru. So then, what does it mean that it's not an atonement? I'm sorry. Elamai Kipru. Well, rather, if so, you're going to say that it doesn't atone. So why are you bringing it? Why are you finishing it? Rav Ashi says, Rav Shisha B'Ei Ravidi Hachik Kashli. Rav Shisha B'Ei Ravidi. This question was like this. As we're asking on Rav Shisha B'Ei Ravidi, you say, what are you saying? It's not an atonement. Then why are you bringing it? So, Rav Ashi explains. If you say it's not an atonement, so the one that was brought for the wrong intention, but the fact is that it had the right intention when it was consecrated, so it still comes from a good source with the right intention. Sheni, the second one, lama huba, why is it coming lechaper? It must be coming just for the atonement. Eliyamr kipru, but if you say that it was atoned before, sheni lama huba, in other words, I know why the first one's being brought because there was a reason why he consecrated it. And that's why it's being brought. The second one, the only reason for the second one to be brought was for an atonement. There's no atonement, then why bring it?
By the way, I sent out.
I think we should leave it over here by Ibailo. Very interesting Gemara coming up.
I sent out to the 5 chat. Turns out all the poskim, modern day, Moshe Feinstein, Kamenetsky, the basic thing is that the net RMD is the required minimum distribution. So let's say a person has 250,000 and they have to take out 5,000 and they have to pay, let's say, 1,000 taxes on it. Then the 4,000 that's left from that, they're supposed to. That's the easiest.
But the miser's after tax.
On the net.
You're not resolving your question.
No, but that's what they say.
I understand this on the net, but
On the net of the RMD.
I understand, but you had another detail in the question. Your detail in the question was if you took miser beforehand, now it accrued interest. So now you would only take the miser off the interest that accrued.
You have to read this answer. It looks like it was they all base it on that. They understand what an RMD is. They still say that.
Right. Okay.
Because you're still making money.
Right.
So.
Okay, have a good Shabbos, everyone.
That's it.
Good Shabbos. Yitzi.